Hey guys, in this video, we're going to look at installing a jQueryUI library in our project. Now, we would have looked at NuGet and package management in a previous video. And so in this video, we're actually going to be looking at how we can go about using jQueryUI in our application, as we will be using the autocomplete feature, which means the text box, when we start typing, it will autocomplete with all possible matches, similar to a Google search. All right. So firstly, we'll take a look at jQueryUI documentation. Documentation is readily available on their website. You can go to jQueryUI.com or just simply Google jQueryUI. And from this website, you will see that they give you a bunch of widgets and tools. As we said, we'll be using the autocomplete for the remainder of this activity. They do offer you download links and CDN links. CDN meaning they host it and you just include that link in your code, and that will take care of the referencing for you. On top of all of that, what is fully required to use jQueryUI is jQuery itself. So jQuery is a framework that is built on top of JavaScript, and it's almost a mainstay, a staple in web development these days. And jQueryUI is just building on top of that framework and giving us some widgets. So early in the lecture, I would have spoken about adding like a date picker to the text box where date time is required. Well, jQueryUI has a date picker, and we can just take a quick look at how the date picker looks and how it works. So they give us a sample page here, and then we click the text box and we see that the date picker appears, and it allows us to just select the date there without having to worry about typing. And I'm here typing and it disables input. So that's one of the advantages to using like a date picker widget instead of allowing the user to type the date for themselves. And then they also show you the source code that is required. They give you an idea of what style sheet files are required, as well as what script files need to be included. And please note, you have jQuery being included as well as jQueryUI. And these would be an example. The SRC value would be an example of what a CDN is. It's just a link to the file being hosted somewhere on the internet. So you don't have to have the physical file. And notice also that order matters. You have to make sure that you include jQuery before you include jQueryUI. Otherwise, you will run into some referencing problems. And then having reference both of these files, then the actual JavaScript function or jQuery function that is employed to actually call the date picker is to target the date picker element, which is the input. So we have a p tag, sure, and then we have an input which is of type text, but the ID is date picker. So we see here that jQuery is using the same kind of identifier as CSS, hashtag for ID and a dot for a class. So hashtag date picker, target that element and call the date picker function. And that is really what invokes the calling of the calendar. The way it gets its style is by including the base theme file for the jQuery UI. All right, or maybe you'd want to include the one specifically for the date picker. I know that they do that also. Anyhow, we're looking at the autocomplete function, which if you look at it in action, given a list or a data bank of all of these values, you should be able to start typing, and then it will make suggestions to you. See that? So if I type T, it's going to look for everything with a T and give me back what I possibly want. And that's how we're going to allow whoever is adding students to courses to actually search for student names, click them, and add them to the class in a nice, fun, dynamic, and interactive way. Now, back in Visual Studio, we need to include the jQueryUI files in our project. Now, once again, Instinct would probably have you just go to the layout page and just include them here, which would be fine. You could actually just copy that code with the CDN links and just include them here on your layout page, and then you go on. But we want to highlight how package management helps us to keep in check with what is happening. Also, we're going to look at what these lines of code mean. So notice that we don't have in our layout page any link tags and we don't have any script tags. But yet we know that we're referencing CSS files and we are referencing JavaScript files. So what is happening is that we got a file in our app start folder called bundle config. Now, bundle config actually contains references to our files for us. And from here, we can actually clump all of the files into one, what you would call function call. So take content/CSS, for instance. So this is the name of the bundle for our CSS files. And then once this bundle is called, it's going to include the bootstrap.css file as well as our site.css file. And if we look on our layout page, then we'll see that we have only one call to the bundle as specified by name. All right, so if you take a keen look, you'll notice that you have scripts.render bundles jQuery. And if we look in the bundle config, you'll see that you have your bundles jQuery here referenced by name, but it's only including something in the scripts folder, right? And we can actually just investigate that. So we go to scripts, and then it's looking for jQuery dash. We do have files that have jQuery and dash, and then it's looking for some version, which would be the version number, which we have 3.4.1. and then .js. So pretty much this gives us a nice dynamic way to always include whatever version jQuery is here, because if it was 1.1.0, which I think it was before we updated it, then it was being referenced and we didn't have to change anything. Now that we updated it, we still don't have to change anything here because it will just look for what is the version that is available to me at the time. The next thing we want to do is use NuGet to include all of the JQueryUI script files and style sheets in our project. So we'll just head on over to NuGet. I have the tab open, but if you don't, then you can just right click the project and go to manage NuGet packages. This will then lead us to explore what is installed, do updates, or go to browse. So we're interested in browsing because we want something that we don't currently have in our solution. So I can just start typing, and I think I've searched for it before. So jQueryUI would come up and it would filter out, of course. And then we can always click on the search results and then just read the description. Also look at the author and make sure that it looks like it's legit. So I'll just go ahead. I can change the version if I want, but I'll leave it at the latest stable and go ahead and click install. I may be prompted and I just click OK and allow it to run. After a few moments and a successful operation, you should see some new files appearing in your content folder as well as your scripts folder. Now we need to let our bundle config include these files upon render. We have a bundle for CSS files already, so I'm just going to add the CSS file that is associated with my autocomplete. So I'm just going to include the autocomplete CSS file in my bundle. So I'm just going to say comma, and then I'm going to add it by path. And the path to this is through content/themes/base/autocomplete.css. So I left a slash there. So it's the tilde, which means, whatever the file path is before we get to content, then include that. Sure, it's a dynamic way of creating a relative URI. And then content slash, and then from contents folder, you go to the themes folder. And then from themes folder, you go to base. And then inside the base folder, we're looking for autocomplete.css. Now, what this will do is when it renders our layout page and it renders this bundle content CSS, then it will load up all of these CSS files one time. So we don't have to go and change it everywhere or anything like that. We just change it one place and it just gets rendered. Another thing that we want to do is include our jQuery-UI file. Now we're already including jQuery, so I'm just going to copy this because it would be a similar dynamic, and I'm just going to paste that. And I'm going to create a new script bundle and call it jQuery-UI. And then what I will modify here is scripts/jQuery-UI, because that's the new pattern of our files, jQuery-UI-version. So it's jQuery-UI- and then whatever version number. So if we update it years down the line from 1.12 to 2.0, then as long as the jQuery-UI part stays intact and it's still a JS file, then this bundle config will just pick up the latest version and just run with it. So that's the advantage to using this bundle config. So we can always just save the changes there. And then because we added a new config, then we are going to have to let our layout page know about it. So we can just duplicate this jQuery bundle reference and we just add -UI. And remember, order matters, so jQuery should always come first and then the dependencies afterwards. So bear that in mind if you're going to be rearranging the order of these files. Now we can just do a quick execution and see what our code looks like. Now we can quickly just execute our application and go to view page source, which will then show us that everything should be rendered. So we have our script files here being included, jQuery and then jQueryUI, and then remember that Bootstrap comes afterwards. So everything is rendered as expected. But we see an error here with our link files. Only bootstrap.css is being rendered, and we should have 3 files. So I'm just jumping quickly back to our bundle config.cs, and I see here where the error is that we did not reference this properly. Sorry about that. So we should have a comma after each block of string, not a plus sign. So we have bootstrap.css, comma, site.css, comma, and then our autocomplete CSS file. And if we have others, then we just use a comma afterwards. So we can just try again and see if we have any improvements. All right, so we can just check that again. And there we go. So everything is being rendered correctly. We have our Bootstrap, then we have our site.css, and then we have our autocomplete.css. And so that is how you go about including a package, at least a client-side package, a JavaScript and CSS package, and how you would allow it to be rendered in your layout page in a dynamic fashion. Of course, having included it in the layout page, those files will be available for every other page, including our enrollments page, which is where our autocomplete code will be executing.